Hey, good morning, my friends. It's Miss Lauren, and today I'm going to read you a story about King Solomon out of our Tiny Truths Bible. King David was getting old, and it was time for a new king to lead God's people. David chose his son Solomon, and everyone celebrated, hoping that he would be an even greater king than David. God loved Solomon very much, and he had some surprising, incredible things in store for him. One night, God spoke to Solomon in a dream. "Ask me for anything you want," he said, "and I will give it to you." What would Solomon ask for? Lots of money? A palace? 1,000 horses? No. Solomon asked for wisdom. Wisdom means knowing what is right and true. Why? Solomon wanted to be wise so that he could be a good king for God's people. This made God happy because Solomon had chosen wisdom instead of money or power or a long life. God promised to give him all of those things. God kept his promise to Solomon, and Solomon became incredibly wise and amazingly rich. In fact, he became the wisest king in the world. When people had problems or arguments, they came to him and he had the answer. Nothing was too tricky for him. This made him a very good king. And because he loved God, Solomon built a huge, beautiful temple where everyone could worship God and thank him. Then he built himself an enormous, fancy palace. His kingdom grew, and people from far and wide heard about his riches, his power, and his wisdom. One day, the Queen of Sheba, who lived far away, heard about King Solomon and came to see his kingdom for herself. She was curious. Was he really as wise and as rich as she had heard? When she arrived, she saw that everything she had heard about Solomon and his kingdom was true. "I can see that God is great," she told him, "and that he has given you incredible gifts. But remember," she said, "God wants you to be a fair and good king. It is your job to show God's people the right way to live. God has given you all this so that you can serve others." But as Solomon grew older, he started to love God less and love his money and power more. He no longer loved God with his whole heart. Instead of trusting God to look after his people, he stored up gold and riches for himself. Instead of trusting God to protect his people, he built a huge army. He even used slaves to build himself a bigger kingdom. Do you remember when God's people were slaves in Egypt? God had rescued them so that they could be free and could live differently as his special children. But now, instead of blessing other tribes, they were using them as slaves to make their kingdom bigger. This wasn't part of God's plan. Solomon had forgotten what God had made him for. God's heart was sad again, and he took everything away from Solomon. Many kings came after Solomon. Some of them loved God, but most did not. Over and over again, God's people forgot how to love him with all their hearts. They forgot how to follow God, and they stopped obeying his rules. They forgot what they were made for. Because of that, God allowed his people to be taken away from the promised land, the special home he had given them. They found themselves far away, captive in a place called Babylon. But even in this new place, God was still with them. He had a plan to bring them back to where they belonged and to make things right again. Well, I hope you friends all have a really great week and know that I love you and that we're praying for you and that we can't wait to all be together again in our Sunday school class. Have a good one. Bye.